classes there, right? So there is commercial real estate investing. There's um, investing in land, investing in flats that you get in really early. You put in a sum and then you make a lot of money pretty soon. With real estate, what I've realized is that the longer you hold it, the chances of you making poorer returns is higher. So essentially, if you hold something for about 10 years or 12 years, equity will probably beat it. But then if you hold it for a shorter term and then you start flipping it, that's when you make a lot of money. And
hello and welcome to another episode of Chaipekharcha. We have a special guest with us today. I would like to introduce Aditya. He is a fellow techie here in Singapore with us. This episode is going to be about real estate investing, which if you want to start doing while you're living outside of India, Aditya is a very good person to get to learn from. We look forward to getting to learn more from you, Aditya, during this episode. Welcome. And would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ishan, for having me here. My name's Aditya. I've been living in Singapore for the past 6 and a bit years. Like the rest of us, I started off my career in India. I done my bachelor's and master's from BITS Pilani, and after that, so I done a dual degree program there, and I had joined. So I graduated during the recession, the last great recession in 2009, and at that point, jobs were hard to find. But fortunately, we had an internship program, and I got through a year-long internship, which ultimately converted into a job. In the beginning, I had thoughts of like I guess the rest of us. There was this great conundrum of, do I go abroad and do an MS, which a lot of my classmates were doing, and the other stream that a lot of people took was, do I do an MBA, right? But to me, the one overwhelming thought was that I should not be studying anymore because I just had enough. And so I decided that I should at least try and start working, making some money, stuff like that. And then that, coupled with the fact that I'd already landed the internship, which then led to a job that just kickstarted it. I think fortunately for me, I had quite a good boss and a mentor, and they really taught me the basics of computer science and stuff like that, which have stood me in good stead even today, right? So that started off, and I worked in one company for a long time. At that point, I even bought a house right next to the company because I really thought that I'm going to retire there. And that's how naive and stupid I guess I was. But that didn't last long. I had a stint in the US for about a year and a half, and that changed things significantly for me, where I realized how tech talent in the US is so scarce, and so highly valued as well, right? So for a while I was in the US, I had a job offer from there to just continue going there. But then my wife and I decided to come back to Bangalore. So we came back to Bangalore, and then at that point I realized that what I'm doing in the company was not sufficient, and I should be doing more and making more money and stuff like that. And that's when I started interviewing for the first time as well. This is about 9 years after I first joined my first job. That then led to me joining another company, and from there on, I moved to Singapore with the same company, and yeah, I've been here ever since. I'm happy to dive into specific details, but this is what my career has been like so far, and we can talk about the other things if you're interested.
We'll probably dive into many aspects of what you just said, but it's interesting to note that you started your real estate investing journey pretty early in your life, and it started while you were in India. So what triggered it? Why did you go into I need to buy a house now?
So about 2 to 3 years after I started my job, I had no other plans. I thought this is, like I said, I'm going to retire in this company and I'm going to be in Bangalore forever. And I was living in a small room, which was, one of those PG-ish type of places in Bangalore where everyone else literally is. And at that point, my parents came down one day to visit me, and they were really upset that I was living in this small, tiny room, which was really like it was a garage of someone converted into a room. And I was staying there, and my parents were like, "This is not a way to live, and you should be in a better place or whatever." And till then, all of the investment that I was making, I had dabbled in a little bit of a sip with SBI, and at that point, it made some money. It was pretty directionless investing. And then my parents, well, literally pushed me into saying, if you've decided to live here and you're going to be here, why not buy a house? And so they pitched in with a little bit of money, and I pitched in a little, and then we actually bought a house. I wasn't married yet; I was about to get married the following year. At that point, we got a small. It was one of those standalone 3-4 floor apartment buildings by a no-name builder. It was essentially it was a relative of mine who had a friend who was a builder, and then they suggested, why don't you buy this, and we're going to give it to you at a discounted rate. And I didn't even bother checking the papers. I just said, okay, this is a good enough deal, I can afford it, and we just went ahead and bought it. So yeah, it wasn't even seen like an investment. It just felt like the right thing to do at that point, where I thought, okay, I have some money and I'm living in a shed, so why not just buy something? So that is how it started, right? And that kickstarted a whole world of real estate investing, which spiraled into a lot of different ways after that. But yeah, that was the beginning.
So the one thing we know is all billionaires start in a garage. We know that there's been in a garage. We know where this is going. I think that's the one thing missing in my life. I haven't had a garage till now. But that's actually fascinating. I think. So at that time, given that you said you and your parents chipped in to get your first place, and like you said, it wasn't. I'm assuming it wasn't a big house. It was a smallish apartment that you had that time. Uh, did you have to take a loan? Did you have to go through some kind of process, or was it you guys bought it outright?
No, we bought it outright. It was about 30 lakhs. So even at that point, it wasn't a
It
lot.
wasn't very okay.
Yes, yeah. So it was about 30 lakhs, and we bought it. It was a big house in the sense that it was a 3-bedroom house, but it was a small apartment and not a, like I said, a no-name builder really, right?
Right.
And then yeah, there's a lot more that I learned after I bought the house as to why that house was so cheap. But to begin with, at least I didn't have to take a loan. I had a little bit of savings, and yeah, and then my parents chipped in.
So we'll actually go into why that house was so cheap, because I do want to ask you how you identify a good property and what things you look out for,
Yeah,
which I'm guessing you learned some of these things
yeah.
from this experience. So you then moved to the US after some point, right? So did you at that time in the US also think about buying property or buying property back in India from the US, or did that start happening after Singapore?
No, actually, the one thing that happened to me right at the beginning was that as soon as I moved into this house, I got married, and then my wife moved in with me, and then we started realizing why that house was priced so low. And it was primarily because there were all kinds of, there's these concepts of setback, right? Setback is essentially from the gate of the house, or the boundary of the house, how far away is the actual apartment or the building, right? And there are rules for setback, and there's rules for how many floors can be constructed. This is the FSI ratio, right? I mean, floor space index, which is dependent on the size of the road as well. And so this building was violating literally everything, right? It violated the FSI, it violated the setback rules, it violated the balconies. So, for example, my apartment had two balconies where in the plan there was just one balcony, right? So all kinds of issues with the apartment, and so this was a plan which was sanctioned by the panchayat at that point, and then later I actually realized that the panchayat is not a sanctioning authority, that they cannot even sanction a plan. And so at some point, the government came in and they cracked down on this, and they started saying, uh, no more registrations of apartments which are sanctioned by the panchayat, because and rightfully so. And I was, in one sense, looking back, I'm happy that the government took those decisions, because this apartment did not have a proper sewerage. It did not have a water connection. It did not have. It was, in that sense, a specimen, and I just walked into the trap without knowing. So, and then the worst thing was that there came an apartment which was almost, within touching distance of mine. And so every builder in that row of land parcels was building an apartment, violating all of the rules, and was building an apartment which was literally touching this. So I could stand in my balcony and touch the next apartment, right? It was that bad. So obviously, when I bought it, it wasn't that way. It was, there was an empty space next to it, and so I couldn't even imagine that someone would build something like that. But then later on, I realized that, okay, this is how it is here, and that is why I got it so cheap, right? So there is no free lunch, and that's actually true. So to circle back to your question, we got the apartment, and then we realized that, okay, we need to move to a better apartment. At that point, we decided to put the apartment up for sale, but then obviously it was not as attractive as when I bought it. So I got it for 31 lakhs. But within a year, what I realized, so I started finding out what the other builders were, who were building equally bad apartments, uh, and what they were charging, and they were charging upwards of 45. This was less than a
Okay.
year. So I bought it for 41. It was 45 less than a year. I then sold my apartment for 43, right? So I'd made a neat 30 something percent profit within a year.
Yeah.
Um, so I took that, and then I went and bought a larger apartment, a better sort of a community with a reputed builder. And this time I made sure that I looked up the papers and everything was fine. The plan was sanctioned by the right authority. So there's a lot of learnings in between that period. At that point, we had bought a second apartment. At that point, I had to take a loan.
Right.
So that, and then after I bought the second apartment, we then decided to move to the US for a bit. So within the US, I had no plans of buying, because we always knew that we would eventually come back one day. Yeah.
Right. And so maybe we can go into this. So when you moved to the US and you had this new apartment that you'd just taken, I'm guessing, a while back, did you put that up on rent? Did you just leave it there in India to be managed by someone else?
Yeah. So the apartment was lying empty, partly because, again, this is another mistake. I was emotional about the apartment because it was a new apartment. No one had lived there before, and we knew that we would come back, one day, right?
Yeah.
And then we would actually live there, and we had done up the apartment well, and there was all these nice knickknacks that you buy, and there's a lot of emotions attached to it. And so we decided that no, we won't rent it out. And so I'd lost about 1.5 years of rent when I did, but we came back eventually, and so I was happy with the fact that, okay, no one else was living in this place when I was there. There's a lot of people who advised me that you should have rented it out, which in hindsight is probably true. I should have. I lost a lot of money there.
Nice. And I just wanted to like dial a bit back, right? Like you seem to have got into real estate investments so much very early in your career. I just want to understand like how your like investment thinking came about. Like how did you learn about investments? You also mentioned that you did some SIPs earlier. So maybe
Yeah.
let's just go back a bit, talk about the journey of how you came through all this till your second apartment.
Yeah. So when I started off, I had modest SIPs. I had about 4,000 or 5,000 rupees a month, kind of a thing, and I had a relative who was working in SBI, and she actually suggested that that uh, SBI focused fund and like 3 4 of those, and she suggested that just put the money in there, and you're going to have averaged unit prices over a period of time. But then I think I waited about 3 years and I did not see any returns. I grew impatient and I just pulled it on, and at that point I had just bought the second house, and what I did was I needed money to do the furnishing and stuff like that. So I pulled the money out at a loss from the mutual funds and put it all into the apartments furnishing and stuff like that. Again, bad decision. I should have stuck to it, and I would have at this point made a lot more money out of the SIP. But then, yeah, at that point I didn't know better. So this was the beginning of my investment journey, really. Um, and then at that point, I had a loan. I was working in the US, and I was making money both in India as well as in the US, because our company had this weird scheme that I think it was partly tax saving reasons, that you would go on an expat package outside, so the rent and everything would be paid for. You would make money both in the US, and you'd get your salary in India. And so I aggressively repaid my loan, which we can get into why I did that and so on. But I felt that was one of the best things I had ever done, because within about 3 years, I had cleared the entire loan and I was loan free. Yeah, that is when I started looking at additional investments. So pretty much 5 6 years into my career, I had one house. I had sold one house, and I had made losses in my premature mutual fund investments, and I had a cleared loan. Right, so that is what I had. That is how my investing looked like at that point.
Great. And did you have any kind of a guru who was helping you, or just like uh, test it out and see how it works?
Uh, till the point I'd come back from the US, no, I had no one who I hadn't even looked up online for ways to invest or what to do with my money and so on. It was pretty much because I had made the decision to buy the house so early. We had almost single-minded focus that all we had to do was clear the loan, right? So we just thought we whatever we make, every rupee would just go into the loan, and that way we would also save on interest. And I hated the idea of having a loan and repaying a set amount every month and so on. So that was my investment philosophy, if you can call it that, at that point.
Yeah, great. I think repaying loan very early saves you a lot of money. Maybe you can go into that later in the episode. Hopefully, if you have some calculations, that's going to be great for the business. Yeah, over to you, Shan.
I actually want to question on the emotions around all of this, because both buying a house and getting a loan are not just simple decisions. They're very emotional decisions to make. You mentioned I had the house, I didn't want to give it out on rent because there's emotions attached to it. The repaying of the loan may not be the best fiscal decision, but is an emotional decision that needed to be, because I didn't want the loan on my head. How do you deal with that? And do you think whatever you've done, would you do it differently now if you thought about it more in a rational manner than just the feeling at the moment?
Yeah, we've thought about this quite a bit, both my wife and I. That was it the best decision to buy a house so early, and was it the best decision to repay the loan? And I think if I had to do it again, I would do it the exact same way. I wouldn't change it. So two factors go into it. Primarily, I think emotionally, I'm still the same person. So if I had to take the same decision again, I would probably do it, because it at that point it was well thought out. It wasn't that I was almost made the choice and then justified it post facto, right? We thought about this. Should we invest this in somewhere, in some other deposits, or some other instruments, or just repay the loan? And to date, I think the fact that I I hate taking loans is the same. And so I would probably do the same thing even now, repaying the loan. The thing about buying a house was also emotional at that point, that looking back, living in that garage was not really the best thing to do. And yeah, I mean, if I had to get married, then obviously I'd have to move into a new place. Renting was another option. But then we got that great deal of 30 lakhs and a 3 bedroom. So I was used to having a house of my own. And so, yeah, if I had to do it again, I would do it exactly the same way.
And do you think the repaying of the loan, because like even I'm sure we all agree we would rather not have a loan on our head than have to take a loan. The repaying of the loan eventually, I'm assuming being outside of India and earning outside of India helped with the entire thing.
Yeah.
So the only reason I asked that is obviously we are targeting these questions towards for NRIs. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing buying property back in India or repaying for loans back in India while in NRI, it does help. So maybe we'll dive into your first purchase when the first time you thought about investing while you were overseas and buying a house and what that process was like for you.
So you're talking about after all of this,
Yes.
if I had to, okay.
So no, how
Um,
did you get to that? Because you've invested into more properties after you moved to Singapore, right? So how did you do that the first investment from Singapore? How did you go? How did that come about?
yeah. So between the time I came back to the US, came back from the US to Bangalore till the time I moved to Singapore, I hadn't thought of real estate again. So I had aggressively started putting money into equities primarily through mutual funds. It helped that I almost doubled my salary as soon as I moved to a new company, which kind of showed that I was stuck in a bad place. And then after moving to Singapore as well, the dollar value converted to rupees is quite heady and powerful, right?
Yeah.
And so all of us know that. And so I aggressively saved even after coming back to Singapore. So when I moved to Singapore, I had to keep my place back in India. And at that point, I decided that I would not be repeating the mistake that I did earlier. That was about 2 years of coming to Singapore, right? So after 2 years of coming to Singapore, I decided, okay, maybe I'm not going back to India anytime soon. So it's going to take a while, and so we will this time we will rent. And my wife still did not agree. She was still emotionally attached, and she's like, "How can we have someone else living in our place?" And there's so much of emotion invested in it, and so on. But then I think slowly she started realizing by just looking at the numbers, right? So okay, initially we were thinking of it as we were making 45,000 of rent a month. So times 12 is about 4.8 lakhs, and then you then divide it by 50 or 60. Then it seems like, okay, we just stay for 2 more months in Singapore and then we make the entire thing back. But then we decided that you should not be thinking of it from a dollar perspective, but 45,000 rupees a month is not a small amount in India. And so we decided that we almost pushed for it and said, no matter what, we will rent it out, and we did. And um, even after that, we did not think of buying. But then once we started renting the house, that's when we decided that okay, we probably can't go and live there, and so we need another place that we will buy, which would be for our own consumption. And so we had one place which we had rented out, which is, like I said, giving us decent rent. And then we decided that we'll buy another place just for staying. So at that point, we met. We had these real estate fairs in Singapore, and so I visited, and then I just on an impulse decided that I'm going to buy another place just for staying. At that point, it helped that it was there was a split payment. It's about 20% of payment every year, and so I could afford the payments again without taking a loan, and that was helpful as well. So I had my equity investments going. I had saved up a decent sum, and then by the time the property fair happened and I booked an apartment, I had the 20%. And I calculated that over the next 4 years or 5 years, I could easily pay back the 20% without taking a loan and without it affecting my equity investments as well, right? So we had that nicely sorted out. At that point, I got in touch with the whole world of real estate, primarily through friends and so on. And what we decided, and what I started seeing is that um, uh, the whole real estate investment scene in India, and the whole online discourse of the fact that real estates give you poor returns and that there's, you're just wasting your money by putting it into real estates. And all these gurus, financial gurus, come out and say that, never invest in real estate. And apart from the one that you're staying in and all of that, I found that most of the people give out these advice because they themselves have never invested in real estate and have never made real money, right? So, I mean, there is conventional wisdom of, if you look at generations before us, all of the wealthy people traditionally have big investments in real estate. But then, even if you look at real estate investing logically, what I decided was that, or what I learned over that period was that you have to look at real estate investments just like you would in your equity investments, right? You have to know what you should invest in. Things like, so there's classes there, right? So there is commercial real estate investing. There's um, investing in land, investing in flats that you get in really early. You put in a sum and then you make a lot of money pretty soon. With real estate, what I've realized is that the longer you hold it, the chances of you making poorer returns is higher. So essentially, if you hold something for about 10 years or 12 years, equity will probably beat it. But then if you hold it for a shorter term and then you start flipping it, that's when you make a lot of money. And yeah, this I learned by investing in a couple more properties and investing in a friend's real estate business, wherein we actually calculated the numbers. So this guy's a builder, and he asked me if I want to invest in his venture, and I went in, and we realized that if you pull out in about a 3 to 4 year time frame, you actually make much more than what you would in a traditional mutual fund. So that was the thought process.
It's very interesting.
Sorry, just to summarize what Bharat was saying. So initial returns on real estate are much higher, and slowly it starts to diminish over a period of time. So you need to get out and at a time when you made sufficient returns, and not, unlike equity, not keep holding on for as long as possible. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Madhvesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, like very interesting perspective. But what I would like to understand is like one of the age-old things that is attached with real estate is like it's really difficult to flip so early. Like as with equity, you can just like sell today and get the money immediately. So can you just like talk to that aspect of how difficult or how easy was it added to the complexity that you are not in India?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true, right? So I've exited from at least one property, exiting another property pretty soon. It is difficult because you need people who can afford or can have the ability to put down large sums of money. That's one. And then the second thing is there is a system, right? So there's a system of registrars and brokers and people in between and lawyers and all of that you have to navigate through. And so both buying should be informed and should be something that you're basing on off of proper research, and then exiting also is a longer time frame. But then what I've realized is that once you do this, doing this a second and a third time makes you much better at it, and you sort of understand the entire ecosystem much better. When someone's pulling the wool over your eyes, that that this is not right, and yeah, so that's absolutely true.
This is the
With
end
a
of part
mutual fund, I
1
could sell it
of the
tomorrow and I could
episode.
get the money deposited
We
into my
will
account
continue
in maybe
next
2 or
week
3 days.
with
Sure,
part
it's a much
2.
longer time frame, but like I said,
Thank you for
as long as
listening
you time it well,
and
you should
stay
be able
tuned.
to make more than an average mutual fund.